Believe it or not, there are just under 3 months now until Election Day, and in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio is sitting pretty in the polls. New numbers from New York One and Baruch College show de Blasio at 43%. Republican Nicole Malliotakis is the only other candidate in double digits, and nearly a third of voters are still undecided. Former City Councilman Sal Albanese is struggling to gain traction. But Albanese is trying to gain attention by riding the subways every day and hammering transit troubles as a major issue to try and nail Bill de Blasio on. We've also just learned that Albanese will qualify for a primary debate, and Dom just sat down with Sal Albanese. Dom?
Well, Andrew, last week we had the opportunity to speak to Republican candidate Nicole Malliotakis and interviewed Albanese this week. Each of them are running scrappy campaigns as they try to unseat de Blasio. Mr. Albanese, I have known you for some 30 years. Why do I get the impression that this run for mayor for you is personal, that this run amounts to just how much you dislike New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio?
I'm not a fan of Mayor de Blasio's, but it's beyond personal, because I think he's doing a terrible job as mayor. We have a situation in New York City where homelessness is at record levels. Affordability is a major problem in terms of housing. Mass transit is melting down, and the mayor has shown no interest in that area. The corruption at City Hall is at record levels, so I think this mayor should be retired. That's why I'm in the race. Beyond the fact that I'm not a fan personally of the mayor, this is more about substance, about public policy, and I think the citizens of New York City want a full-time mayor who's going to really focus on problems that the city has, and he's not doing that.
But the mere fact that you're challenging a fellow Democrat, aren't you hurting Mr. de Blasio and helping Nicole Malliotakis?
I don't think so. I believe that my candidacy is going to raise important issues, even issues that Malliotakis is not addressing, like political corruption, political reform. I'm also battling the machines in the city. I think the political machines in the city are archaic. They're made up of professional politicians. I'm running as an independent Democrat that wants to bring change to the city's political system. And by the way, that political system is corrupt on a bipartisan level, Republicans and Democrats. Malliotakis is a great lady, I like her, but she's not talking about political reform either. She's part of the political class.
Tell us about the lawsuit, Mr. Albanese, that you filed this week against Mayor de Blasio.
Well, he's trying to stick taxpayers with $15 million of legal fees for the investigations involving pay-to-play in New York City. He and his aides were engaged in political activity. This is not something that the taxpayer should be paying for. It's not related to government service. It's not why people elected this mayor and his aides who were engaged in political activity. And the city of New York normally doesn't indemnify employees when they act outside the scope of their employment. I've represented a couple of employees that the city would not indemnify, and here we are. The mayor of the city of New York is trying to stick taxpayers with $15 million in legal fees. $2 million are his own fees, which, by the way, he said months ago he would not let the taxpayers pay for it. And then on the 4th of July weekend, he turns around and says, well, I am going to have the taxpayers pick up the bill. We're suing them. We think that they violated the standard and the law in this case, and we want that money recouped for the taxpayers.
But the feds filed no charges against the mayor or his team.
They brought no charges because pay-to-play and legal corruption, unfortunately, is legal, but the feds said that he acted unethically and inappropriately, as did the Manhattan DA. So we need a higher standard for the mayor of the city of New York. Not being indicted is not a standard that we want for our mayor. We want our mayor to have integrity and promote good government policies, not policies that basically promote giving him hundreds of thousands of dollars so you can get his personal cell phone numbers and he can do favors for you. I mean, the U.S. attorney said that he did favors for big donors. I mean, pay to play is unfortunately legal. I mean, we have the governor of Virginia who stole everything that wasn't nailed down. And the feds couldn't convict him. These laws are written by politicians, and they're murky. So beyond a reasonable doubt stand is tough to get to. But the fact of the matter is that both U.S. Attorney and the Manhattan DA said that de Blasio acted unethically and inappropriately. Now the court of public opinion is going to have to decide whether he should be reelected or not.
Also, tell me about this social media site you started. What's the name of it?
It is a D-Blah meter, which people...
D-Blah meter.
It's a D-Blah meter, which people can go on and rank their disapproval of de Blasio on a number of issues. And it's really catching on because as I travel around the city, Dominic, I don't see any enthusiasm for this mayor. All I see is people that are really down on him for good reason because he's doing a terrible job, and people that are blasé about it. I have not found an enthusiastic de Blasio supporter anywhere in the city. All over the city, you know, there are people that tell me he's got a great base of support in communities of color. Well, I campaign a lot in public housing. I don't see that enthusiasm for Bill de Blasio.
What is the biggest problem facing New York and your solution to it?
The mass transit system. I've been talking about it for a long time. The system is melting down, and the mayor and the state have not done enough. And I've got a plan to revamp the mass transit system and fix the signal system. The signal systems are what are causing the majority of the problem. They're from 1904, Dominic, and I've got a plan to fund it, which is on my website, voteforsal.com. And I've been talking about this for a long time. And you probably remember this. In 1996, I rode the trains for 24 hours to point out the need for funding. In 2013, when I ran, I said the city has to increase its share, do its fair share. So you can go to the governor and say, hey, we're doing our fair share, please help us. But I've got a number of proposals for funding it, but I think it's the biggest problem facing the city right now. There are others, of course, but that's a big one.
I close this way. Certainly you're facing an uphill battle in your run for mayor, but let's say for argument's sake that you are elected. What's the first thing you do as mayor of New York?
I'm going to call a mass transit summit immediately to get all the stakeholders together and figure out how to fund the mass transit system into the future, because it really is important to the future of the city. Other cities like Paris and London are way ahead of us in that area. So that's the first thing I'm going to do.
Dominic, I know Albanese says that he's running to win, but he knows it's a long shot effort. What's your sense? Is he actually running to win? Is he looking to change the debate, or is he looking to hurt de Blasio?
B and C. He's not a fan of de Blasio.
Well, we got that.
And that's why, Andrew, I say don't believe the polls. Now, you're going to say, what type of water have I been drinking? I know de Blasio has a double-digit lead. But I said the same thing about Bloomberg. Don't sleep on this guy. I know Bloomberg is a billionaire. I am telling you, we're seeing signs of softness in de Blasio's support. He may not have a problem in the primary, but don't take for granted Nicole Malliotakis in terms of Greek, Latino, speaks Spanish. I know she's a Republican. Republicans, you know, don't do well in New York City. But hey, ask Giuliani and Bloomberg if Republicans do well.
Vincent, Albanese was talking about a lack of enthusiasm that he had sensed for de Blasio, and there may be some truth to that. Do you need enthusiastic support to win a mayor's race, or do you just need support?
Not as a Democrat. In fact, I would say the less enthusiasm in the race would be to the advantage of de Blasio. You know, the one opponent that's not on that list is Trump, and that's who Bill de Blasio has elevated himself to be the anti-Trump. He went to Germany. He's the progressive Democrat. He's taken every position against Trump, and he will use Trump in the debates against Nicole and whoever else is there. And that's who de Blasio is running against. He will remind voters of that throughout the general election, and he will win. What I am surprised about is that as an incumbent, with 70% Democratic enrollment, he's only at 43%. A guy like that should be comfortably above 50.
It's interesting, and you and I have talked that we both think it's a good tactic that Albanese has been riding the subways as much as he had. It's certainly an issue that New Yorkers are invested in, but it is a state-run entity that you wouldn't think would factor into a mayor's race. How much of an issue do you think the subways and the MTA will be in this mayor's race when it, again, more of a state issue than a local one?
Not much at the end of the day, and to be brutally honest with you. But candidates in this day and age with the New York City campaign finance system, which levels the playing field to a degree. But to your point, it is very tough to beat the power of incumbency. De Blasio is the incumbent. De Blasio is in overwhelmingly Democratic New York City. So it's going to be tough. But we'll see. Remember, unfortunately, I'm old enough with a little bit of the gray hair and the receding hairline here. I'm old enough to remember to have worked as a journalist and seen where people that were not supposed to win ended up winning. So it's possible.
And toward that end, if Albanese gives up his seat on the subway to Malliotakis, if I can use a phrase, can she ride the subways? Again, I apologize for that pun, but can she ride the subways as a winning issue?
Listen, I mean, there are three different types of campaigns you can run. A structural campaign, which is Bill de Blasio's campaign. It's a Democratic city, he's going to run as a Democrat. The other two that are left are personality and issue. The one issue that's really irritating New Yorkers is the state of the subway system. It's the only issue out there. Is it a winning issue? Probably not, but it can get you some traction.
So why has the path for Bill de Blasio been so clear in this cycle when you would certainly assume from the lack of enthusiasm that there might have been a ripe environment for Democratic challengers or for more Republicans to get in?
Well, once the investigation yielded nothing and he wasn't indicted or anything like that, that closed down any opposition on the Democratic side.
And keep in mind, New York has not seen a Democratic mayor outside of de Blasio in 20 years. Yeah. So that's why this is nothing new.
Right.
It's just that we haven't seen this in a 20-year period.
But even with a lack of super positives for de Blasio and I guess a lack of super negatives for him too.
The conditions aren't right. I mean, look, take the Giuliani race in '93 as a textbook example. You had a weak Democrat incumbent and a very polarizing issue. Those conditions aren't here.
Vincent, Dominic, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekends. Really appreciate it. Up next, youth football enrollment way down, and some New Jersey high schools have actually shut their football programs entirely. This as head injury concerns pile up, and a new report showing the connection is bound to make those worries grow.